Hi, this is Dr. Maggie Perry with Tell Me What You're Proud Of. I'm here for my fourth and final session with John, and John has just listened to my consultation with Dr. Jessica Bull. So, John, thanks you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, can you tell me what reactions you were having as you listened to me talking with Jessica?
Yeah, I think the thing that came up for me like right away was just the mind-body connection she talked about. I think sometimes I felt anxious going to an event or doing something, and like cognitively, I'm like, this isn't threatening, this is something I want to do, but my body, like she talked about, sends different signals. And after listening to that, I practiced the self-soothing. Like I actually physically had to touch myself and like self-soothe that way, and that calmed my body down. So I found that helpful.
Can you be more specific? Like what kind of situation made you anxious that you use self-touch to help calm your body down?
Yeah, there was two. So one was another conversation with my mom because I wanted to try it, and like I could feel like anger coming up. And I just like I did. She said, like she said, I put my hand on my chest and I just kind of like massaged my chest a little bit, and that did help like soothe my feelings. So I found that helpful.
Great. Do you want to be more specific about what made you feel angry and how you noticed that anger was there?
Yeah. So my mom might have some history, right? So we were talking about some stuff in terms of my relationship with other people and how she interacts and how she talks about other people. And her immediate response is defensiveness. Um, and so it feels frustrating not to be able to like make any progress there. But the self-soothing helped me like kind of ground myself and not get too carried away with my anger. And it definitely helped in terms of like having the conversation and just my feelings in the moment.
What was helpful about having that conversation?
Well, it was a conversation I hadn't comfortably had with my mom. Like there was things I said that I just didn't feel comfortable saying in the past. And so just being able to say those things is important for me. Like whether her response is her response, but I got a lot of just being able to say those things.
Great. And can you expand on that? What's helpful about being able to kind of speak your truth?
I think one thing I'm noticing is like my mind has to actually do certain things to buy in. Um, I can like understand things cognitively, like being able to speak what I want to say is important. I can understand that. But until I actually do it, there's like some part of my mind that doubts whether I can do it or not. So I think that's the benefit I get from that.
Hmm. And then what do you learn as you practice that?
Well, a couple things. Like this time I thought, well, I learned how to kind of work with my body and calm my body in the moment. I think something else I've learned is I can handle the response and I can handle what happens. I think one of the things that made these conversations difficult and having them in the first place was I just didn't trust that I could handle what was going to happen afterwards.
Tell me what you mean by you didn't trust that you were going to be able to handle what was going to happen afterwards.
Yeah, I thought maybe she'd explode on me or maybe it would really rupture the relationship and maybe I was being unreasonable or could have gone a number of negative ways. And then I didn't think I could handle like rupturing a relationship that's important to me. Um, but one, that didn't happen. And two, even if it had, I think there's ways to move forward that are still healthy.
So you're saying that by asserting yourself and asserting your needs, you learned perhaps that you were stronger than you thought you were, that you could handle more emotion than you thought you could, and also that by being assertive, you actually weren't going to rupture the relationship the way your mind had assumed.
Right. Yes. I think I just had to do the thing to actually like buy into it.
Really happy to hear that. And then circling all the way back, how was how was thinking about the connection between your mind and body helpful again in being more assertive? How are those connected?
Well, for me, my anger kind of leads my actions sometimes. And I'm not proud of the way that happens. And I've always kind of worked on different ways to deal with that. And this feels like another tool to like not just act on my anger or act on whatever emotion I'm feeling and kind of just self-soothe and calm myself.
Can you explore where your anger is coming from? Do you understand like potential narratives that contribute to why you have trouble coping with anger?
Yeah, I think one of the earliest ones that I definitely know is I'm just afraid of what my anger is going to do, like what actions I'm going to do. So I'm angry at this person, I'm going to explode at them, or I'm angry, I'm going to withdraw. Um, so that was the initial fear. And I think the other fear is I'm just not a good person if I'm like angrily interacting with this other person. So those are kind of where my mind goes, the big ones.
And then how are you shifting those narratives as you work with anger?
Well, I think one thing is just accepting that anger is going to be there, right? It's just an emotion that I'm going to have and it's going to pop up. And it can also be a signal that something's going on for me. Like maybe there's a need that I'm not meeting or somebody's kind of disrespecting my boundaries and I need to do something about that.
Yeah, both of those completely make sense. So it seems like you're really shifting your narratives around anger. And then is that making your anger less intense or just easier to cope with?
I think it's just easier to cope with, honestly.
Okay. Are there still things about anger that scare you?
Yeah, I think one thing about it is I still don't fully feel like I'm in control of my actions when it comes. I think there's times where it still feels like it overwhelms me and I just want to like unload on somebody. And that's not necessarily going to be the most effective thing to do in that moment. So that still scares me.
What kind of triggers will get you to the point where you're so angry that you feel overwhelmed?
I think if I'm being disrespected in like my boundaries or somebody's maybe taking advantage of me, like I'm trying to work out a problem with this person and they're just not being reasonable with me. I think that tends to really trigger me.
And then can you give me an example of when it feels like someone's taking advantage of you?
Sure. So recently, going through the separation with somebody and they're asking me to do these things and like throw away their garbage and do things that I feel like are just unreasonable. And they're not really considering where I'm coming from with it. So to me, that just feels like unreasonable that you wouldn't think of the other person at any point.
And then that's giving you the urge to unload on them, so to speak.
Right.
How are you coping with that?
I'm pretty proud of how I coped with it, honestly. Like there was one email I sent that was maybe borderline, but it wasn't over the top. And other than that, I've been pretty proud of how I handled it.
Be more specific. How are you handling it that you're proud of?
I think my mind has shifted more to solving problems as opposed to ruminating about the problems or catastrophizing about what's going to happen. So a lot of what was happening recently, my mind was able to access, well, how could I solve this? Like, what would be the next step that I want to move towards? So that's what made me proud about how I handled it.
Yeah, what would you have done in the past? Can you be more specific?
Yeah, I know I would have ruminated. Like that would have been probably a big chunk of my time. Um, and I would have feared what the future held for me. Those two would have been for sure there. And I think my mind wouldn't have been able to access as much problem solving as it did because it would be stuck on what happened in the past or what might happen in the future.
And then what are you doing when those thoughts show up? I assume you still have worries about what'll happen in the future or what happened in the past. So how do you cope with them?
I try to remind myself that those aren't helpful thoughts, and I'll literally say not helpful just to like get myself back away from them. Um, one thing that Reed Wilson has talked about is sometimes when you have a thought come up that isn't like in line with your values, accompany it with a thought that is. I've been trying that as well.
Can you give me an
Um,
example?
think of one recently. I think one that came up recently was that I'm just going to be alone forever. Um, and the accompanying thought there was, well, what can I do with my time that might like bring me energy or bring me some joy? And so that's a recent example.
That is very impressive. in the presence of a separation, having the thought, what if I'm alone together forever, is very common. And to be able to immediately shift with what can I do with my time that's going to bring me energy is a really effective way to think. That's a new way of thinking for you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I couldn't access these thoughts before in the past.